Seems like just about every week we hear about a new case of cyber hacking involving a business or maybe a major retailer where customers' financial and personal information is stolen. Of course, it all leads to the danger of credit card fraud and identity theft. Most recent case involved the health insurance giant Anthem Incorporated, second largest health insurer in the nation. The breach there of the database impacts, it's an estimated 80 million Americans. Leads us all to think about what we can do to protect our information. But it's also leading to a burgeoning field of insurance protection for those who hold our information and could be hit by hackers, cyber liability insurance. Michael Levin is here with us to talk about that. He's an account executive with the Dowd Insurance Agencies locally. Thank you for being with us, sir. You say anybody, any business that deals in any way with credit information or personal information should be aware that they face significant financial liability if they're hacked.
True. Most people have heard about these large breaches, like the Targets, like Michael's store, like JP Morgan. And what people don't hear about are the smaller breaches that happen pretty much every day, and they're happening more frequently. Most criminals now view the smaller businesses as soft targets. They don't typically have the resources to have a big IT staff or the budget for it, so they view them, and often with good cause, as softer targets to attack.
And I know you have an IT background, so you can look at this both from the insurance liability and the technical end as well. If I understand this properly, I mean, really every mom and pop corner store that accepts Visa and MasterCard, and just about everybody does, they have the small box, they swipe there. Sometimes it's even a little box you attach to your cell phone for really small businesses, or so people that go out on the road perhaps selling, they're swiping that. They are conceivably hackable and could be responsible.
So absolutely, and there's the payment card industry, PCI, sets standards for, and there's a standard that any retailer who accepts credit card must meet. If they don't meet that, they're hacked, then they're susceptible to some heavy fines, which the cyber liability insurance, in some cases, some policies will cover that.
If you are breached, your company, your office, and again found not to have been up to standards, you can be fined professionally. But beyond that, there's always the possibility of legal liability, someone whose identity is stolen, who knows what can happen with personal information. The cost can be overwhelming.
So there's a couple of things. One, your standard general liability policy usually excludes the cyber liability. So some companies out there may think they're covered from that liability because they have a general liability policy. Most often, it's excluded. So where the costs really come in are twofold. One, in Anthem's case, within a day of the breach, there were some class action lawsuits filed against Anthem already. So they're going to have those suits, and they've got cyber insurance in place. They'll have defense costs as part of their cyber, and then so that's one aspect of it. There's also breach costs. Which are costs that they have and will have. For example, the minute they had that breach, they're looking to contain it. They're going to have a forensics team come in and try to figure out what happened, and just as important, try to determine, is there any backdoor software that the criminals will have ongoing access. So the forensics will be covered under a cyber policy. Then they've got notification costs, so they have to notify 80 million people across multiple states, and each state has their own law, and so they have to comply with multiple states. They have to figure out how to comply with that. So typically, the cyber policy will send in a breach coach, and they'll help them deal with this and move forward. Then they also will offer, and they just announced it today, that they'll be offering credit monitoring for 80 million people. And in some cases, they'll offer ID fraud protection for 80 million people. So those costs can be astronomical and will be, and that's covered under the cyber policy. They also they'll set up either a call center, and I believe they have set up a website already, but they may set up a call center, people to manage that call center. So when people are calling, and you can imagine 80 million people calling in, the panic that's set in, that they'll have people to staff those and effectively deal with those questions and their customers.
Before we started, you were telling me a couple of amazing stories that, if you're a small business person, I don't think you'd ever think of this. Probably some of the bigger businesses don't. You said one of the ways that a company could be breached is through their copy machine.
Correct. Yeah, this actually happens. So copy machines these days are actually computers, and they have hard drives in them. And typically you can work with your vendor to set up the settings properly so it's not saving any of the data on the hard drive. But a lot of times people aren't even aware of that, and what they'll do is they'll be copying. This happened to another healthcare company where they were copying records, and they had personal health information that they were copying. The copier was leased. They returned the copier off the lease with a couple 100,000 records of personal health information, and they were hit with a fine somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million. So you've got multiple ways to get hit. As we were discussing earlier, the lost laptops is another. That's a very common cause for a breach, especially if those laptops aren't encrypted. You've got tablets, cell phones, smartphones. All of those can easily lead to a breach and have led to breaches.
I would think a lot of the folks who probably need this protection most don't even think about it, don't even think of themselves as someone who has a lot of this kind of personal health or personal credit or financial information.
Sure. Any type of financial company obviously has a lot of personal health and personal identifiable information, such as Social Security numbers, which are big, which is what's affecting Anthem right now. All medical facilities have personal health information. With personal health information, there's a black market. There's a black market for all that information, but especially with the personal health information now, they estimate that per record on the black market, it's like anywhere between $15 to $20. So that's your Medicare information, if you've got Medicaid information. So there's a big value for criminals now, and high incentive for them to access that information.
Again, people that have an awful lot of information but may not think of it this way: medical and dental offices, every attorney, and accountants. Your CPA, who probably thinks, okay, I'm dealing with people's taxes and things like that, but you don't really see yourself as a target for hackers, and they really are, aren't they?
And absolutely. Again, I can't stress it really enough. On the smaller side, people, they hear about these breaches and they understand it's very costly, but there's a mindset that you're only going to go after these big companies with these huge databases, and it's just not the case. It's I just saw a study that said 60% of the small businesses who suffer a cyber attack are out of business within 6 months. So that's a big number, and there's a trend where if the smaller companies are seen as easy pickings, then they will be targeted.
Charities and nonprofits who have fund drives, who collect money, maybe taking money through credit cards, even a call and credit card, they've got to worry.
Absolutely. All those, it's really anybody who's taking any type of personal identifiable information or personal health information has an exposure, and it's unlimited. It's not just people hacking into their system. Most people hear cyber liability and they think, oh, it's some sophisticated hacker who's going to hack into my system. And it's really not the case. You've got stuff like the copiers. You've got lost devices. I heard of a instance where there was a company who provided a shredding service, and they have the secure containers in the facility. And I had heard that a person dressed up like an employee of the company came in, put the box on the hand truck, and just carried it right out. And that's, you know,
who knows what they had in those records.
Exactly. So, the reason the exposure and the chances for loss it's really unlimited. If you've got a company who is selling over the internet, and somebody attacks, it's called a denial of service attack, then they could be out of business for months. And with a cyber liability policy, certain policies will offer business interruption, and that particular case would not be covered under your standard liability or property policy.
Well, Michael Levin from Dowd Insurance Agencies, thank you so much for coming in and giving us some perspective on another thing we got to worry about in today's society.
My pleasure.